So this is the second half of the panel discussion with Jared Lysek on Zav Girl's channel. He discusses a number of things in here that I find interesting and which I will comment on along the way. I apologise, I've done my best to try and keep the screen level throughout this whole panel discussion. Zav Girl, being ADHD like the rest of us, kept fiddling with the screen, meaning that where I was zoomed in on Jared, occasionally he would zip off the screen as Zav Girl changed the screen, and I would have to readjust the picture. Hopefully that's not too distracting for people. My co-host today is the cat yet again. She's in crazy mode, so she's basically trying to kill everything in the house, bouncing around the house, just being a general nuisance. So you'll probably hear lots of odd background noises. It's possible that you may also cop some doggy snoring along the way. So let's get into it and have a look at this second half of the panel discussion.
Can you answer what gear the car was in, or can't you answer?
So while our team did not specifically look at what gear it was, you can see in the video that the wheels are turning, which would indicate that the vehicle is in neutral.
Otherwise, that mug would have went.
Wow.
This seems to have been one of the most controversial discussions when it comes to Kiely's car. Was it in gear? Was it in neutral? And I stand by what Jared is saying. And let's not forget that Doug Bishop said the same thing. And Doug Bishop is someone with extensive experience in the towing industry. He said the same thing. The wheels were moving freely. It was not in gear. And yeah, we had the little add-on from Ryan. It would have been bouncing. Not exactly bouncing, but it wouldn't have been running smoothly, rolling smoothly, were it in gear. So I agree. The fact that the car was rolling smoothly up onto the bed of the truck says to me that the car was not in gear when it was being pulled out of the water. And I know that there are people that are going to argue this and say that you can still tow it when it's in gear. But the thing with automatics is that with the transmission, when it's in gear, it engages a kind of a lock on the wheels so that they are not going to move freely. So it shouldn't roll so freely if it's in gear. That's my belief. Not just from things I've heard and not just from Jared and Doug, but from the experience of someone who has probably driven over 1 million kilometres in the time that I've been driving. I've killed plenty of cars because I'm heavy on cars, and I've had countless tows. I couldn't even begin to guess how many times I've had to have cars towed. So I am speaking from some amount of experience. I personally believe that the car was not in gear when it was pulled out of the water. I do believe that there would have been keys in the ignition because it appears to have been moving quite freely, and also you saw people reaching in and adjusting the steering, which to me says that there was no steering lock, because had the keys not been in the ignition, there would have been a steering lock occurring as well, and they would not have been able to reach in and adjust the steering like they did.
Okay. So Jared, can you describe the person a little more on the video? That the guy that was there with, I don't even know for sure if it was with Kiely, but does he give you more of a description to where you guys know who it might be?
It's I mean, I think that everybody's already speculating, in any additional information that I would provide. So, I have to be careful in what it is that we do say and what we put out there for a certain reason. So, We
understand.
put out what we can at this moment in time, and like I said, we will put out a lot more later on if it goes down in that direction that law enforcement take it.
I think we can all agree that he showed his true colours on this particular issue. After pressure by people to release the full Roadside Nick interview, he did so, and at the same time dropped Jagger in it in a major way. If you've not heard my thoughts on that, go and check out my Roadside Nick videos where I discuss this in depth.
So from everything that you've seen in your experience, if you had to guess, I mean, would you guess that there was foul play involved in this one? You had to guess.
I'm just going. I'll say this: I would not have put that in our title if we thought it was nothing more than an accident. It's open for interpretation, speculation at this point. There's an entire other theory that it would blow your mind if I even told you. based upon additional.
Whoa.
Even just going with let's see, without giving away too much, and without me saying anything really. If you think about the two people that are moving around the vehicle, there could be more to that story.
Now, it's worth noting, one thing with Jared is that he is very careful about remaining professional when it comes to his channel. So when she asked him if he thought about what he thought in terms of whether it was foul play, he was very, very careful with his answer. But you could tell that he was itching to give more details and more information. I think, to me, it seems pretty clear that he did believe it was foul play, and that in terms of that, there is something in relation to the Roadside Nick stuff and the way they were moving around the car. And I tend to agree with the speculation that a lot of people have said with regards to they were trying to keep Nick away from the back of the vehicle. Whether Kiely was deceased in the back of the vehicle or whether she was in bad shape in the back of the vehicle, I don't believe that the girl that Nick saw was Kiely. And yeah, I think what Jared's hinting at is what many of us have speculated on.
Was Nick able to, sorry, I just have one more question. Was Nick able to say, look at a picture of Kiely and say, this is the girl that I saw, or was it more based off of the vehicle matched the description of her vehicle?
Right now, I'm still gathering some information based upon what I just hinted to you right now.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'm gathering more information on that one. As far as who the male may be, I'm going to say that it was a positive match.
Yeah, got it.
Without saying.
Jared did a really, really good job here of avoiding answering the actual question. So he hasn't actually said whether Nick said that he identified the car or he identified Kiely. And then he slides sideways just to distract people and goes back to talking about the male and saying that that was a positive identification. I have issues from watching the Nick video as to whether it was a positive identification. Like I said, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, go and listen to that, because I do discuss that quite thoroughly in my Roadside Nick discussion. In terms of him avoiding saying whether it was Kiely or whether Nick said it, he recognised Kiely or he recognised the car, what I find interesting and confusing is that initially we're told that Nick recognised the male and did a positive identification on the male, and then at a later date we're told that there was a positive identification on the female. So something about Nick's account changed for some reason, and I don't know if that was him being confused or if there was backlash over them accusing Jagger or what the story was. But I think Jared knows a heck of a lot more here that he's just not willing to tell us.
Even though we didn't know Kiely, we've connected with the story. We're fathers ourselves, we're brothers, we're uncles, we're dads, we're grandpas, and so we have that emotional connection. And if that message from the mom is from her real account, I don't know if it is or not. I don't fault her, and I don't blame her at all, because everybody will go through a grieving process differently.
As much as I dislike the guy, that was quite a noble thing to say, because from memory, and I'd love to get my hands on it and have another look at it, but from memory, the statement that was apparently made by Lindsay was quite scathing of Adventures with Purpose. And it sounds like she was quite angry with them for releasing the video. So he would have been within his rights to talk about the unfairness of them having found her daughter and allowed her to have her daughter home. But instead he spoke about the grieving process and how he didn't blame her if it was her. So definitely kudos for that.
We've also learned in the past, as you've seen the backlash that we receive, and they say no good deed goes undone, that we don't come in on these fresh cases because there's so many agencies and entities and egos and turf wars that take place, that we're not here to make anybody look bad. We don't want to be a part of it. And that's why we have chosen in the past to only work cold cases that everyone has already forgotten about, that these families and the victims need a voice to be remembered and to possibly solve this. And that's why, we're quiet about it. Sometimes law enforcement knows about it. Sometimes they don't.
It's possible that by editing out all the extra babble there, I may have edited out some of the clarifying things. So he's talking about their relationship when it comes to law enforcement with any cases. And something that anyone who has watched any amount of their previous videos would know is that they are very cautious about keeping law enforcement on side and not being publicly seen to shit on law enforcement, basically, because they rely on them for future cases. The moment they are seen as being the sort of team that are going to badmouth law enforcement or do things to make law enforcement look bad, then that's the end of it for what they are doing. It's the end of Adventures with Purpose. So he's always been very cautious about not treading on toes when it comes to law enforcement, and that's what he's talking about here. And I think that explains a lot of why they sat back when Shannon Moon was basically trying to take all the credit for them finding Kiely, and when law enforcement were basically downplaying Adventures with Purpose's role in finding Kiely. Because for them to turn around and call law enforcement out on that would impact them when it comes to future cases.
Do you think that you could tell us if her phone was found in the vehicle?
That one I actually have no idea. I have not heard anything, so I'm not sugarcoating it. I can't say yes or no. I don't have that. We've said even if we had unlimited funding, we feel like we would still have to document this and record this. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to be in a position to where we're stepping on the toes of these agencies to where they resent us. We want to be working with them. So, we have gone into the FBI headquarters and we have trained 20 of their agents. They said, and they were very gracious in opening, while we're in Jersey. And with that, 50% of the cases that we have solved, whether it was they were going to do it intentional or it was an accident, of the 50% that we've seen, they did end up trying to escape as the vehicle is finding that, bubble of air.
I'm just going to point out here that he has said in other interviews that there wouldn't have been a bubble of air because of the open windows. So basically, she wouldn't have been chasing a bubble of air. had she been doing so, had she been trying to escape the water that was coming in at the front, she would have been headed directly for the other open window. Let's not forget that. I think that is something really, really important to keep in mind.
That's a question I want to ask you. With the Kiely situation, how do you think it flipped over? Can you kind of explain that, like which way?
Well, most vehicles we find, 60-70% of them are actually going to be upside down. And the reason for it is, they'll go in the water. And then because the engine is heavier, it's going to nose down. And then because there's air in the wheels, or there's still air in the back of the car, or wherever it's trapped, it's going to, have the car rest a little bit, and then it usually flips over.
Okay, I see. Okay.
So it's how the air is pushed out of the back of the vehicle, or so. Okay.
Yeah, and so, a lot of people were speculating, well, the windows are broken out, and, I think there's only one that wasn't broken. Well, that was because the vehicle was flipped back over while it was underwater to then pull it out. Whereas, those of you who've seen the members only video, you'll see that, most of all the windows were up and intact at that moment in time when it was underwater.
Okay, just a few corrections that we all know about anyway, but it seems that at this point in time, Jared hadn't actually paid enough attention to that particular part of the video. Before the vehicle was pulled up, there was one window open in the front. Whether it was open or broken out has been debated. Many people say that they could see spots where it looked like glass had been broken. Then in the back you had one window that was down halfway, basically as far as it would go because of the wheel arch on the back of the vehicle, meaning that the back windows don't open all the way. So, in actual fact, there were two windows open when the car went underwater. Then when it was flipped, the other window was broken out. We've established that. We know that as a fact. In terms of how the car flipped, he is mostly correct. The weight of the engine would have pulled it down. When a car is in water, you have a weight distribution of 60-40. So the engine, the front of the car where the engine is heavier. And yes, it would have started flipping, but it wouldn't have gone end over end like he is seeming to explain here. It would have gone sort of sideways diagonally, because as the front end dropped, once it dropped enough for the water to start gushing in, the water would have gushed into that open window on one side, meaning that that side of the vehicle would have then started submersing faster than the other side of the vehicle. So the front on that side would have been the part that was submersing fastest, and the vehicle would have gradually flipped as it filled up with water. I'm going to say here that from what I've seen from when I used to watch Adventures with Purpose, Jared is a very, very visual person. So I think without him having sat down and worked through diagrams and stuff like that, then he probably hasn't quite clarified in his head the actual action of that car going underwater and flipping.
Well, anyway, hey,
I have a question for you before you go real quick.
Yep.
I want to get this clarified for chat and everything. The type of equipment and everything that you guys use, what separates you from what law enforcement has to do the job?
We don't have the red tape to where we have to beg for, hey, something new just came out that's better. We'll just go buy it. We are also not trained up on it, once a month or once a year. We're out there using it every single day. You take a bass fisherman that wins all the tournaments. Why is he winning the tournaments? Because he's out there fishing all the time, and he knows how to read his fish finders and what, this fish is, a bass versus a, stripe or whatever. I mean, he's able to tell that because he spends so much time with it, in the same way that in the beginning when we started, everything looked like a car. It didn't matter if it was a 3-foot rock or it was, a tree stump, or everything looks like a car.
I want to reflect on that for just a moment. Let's forget the fact that there were countless flyovers in the exact location where her vehicle was eventually recovered, that there were helicopters and fixed-wing planes that all flew over the location where her car was found, all of them with major high-tech equipment which should have allowed them to find any vehicle that was in the reservoir. And we've got helicopter pilots who apparently said they could see the bottom of the reservoir. But not only that, here he is saying that when they first started out, they would see an object underwater and they would think that it could have been a car because they didn't know how to tell the finer points of it. So he's basically saying that they found the objects underwater, the tree stumps or the rocks, and they had to go down and check before they found out that they weren't vehicles. So him saying that, well, we've had more experience and now we can just eliminate something straight up and say that that big lump isn't a car, that's a rock. Think about it. What is actually being said here is that equipment that law enforcement had, their side scan sonars should have picked up that there was something massive sticking up from the bottom of the reservoir. This is a man-made reservoir. It doesn't have a bunch of natural rocks in it. There's no trees right up to the water edge, so it wouldn't have been a massive tree stump. So for them to have gone over that location in boats with side scan sonar, and they themselves have admitted that they used side scan sonar. So why couldn't they find it? They might have seen a blob, but wouldn't you then question that big thing underwater? We should check that out because then there's no other big things in the area. Maybe that is a car. And especially given that it was in a location where it would appear to be a direct route from one of the tracks to drive straight out and into the water there. So to me that says when they went over it with their side scan sonar, there was nothing down there. Let's not forget also that someone rang in to Ickard Mel quite early on in the piece and spoke about one search team that was out there on a particular day using magnetic anomaly detectors. These are specifically designed to find metallic objects underwater. So even though he's saying here, well, we can forgive law enforcement because they don't have the training that we do, so they wouldn't necessarily recognise that big blob underwater as being a car, let's put that in context. It was a big blob underwater. It was something underwater in a location where you could have considered a car had been put into the water. There would have been access for a car to have been put into the water there. Think about it.
And so we actually met with, I want to say, 15, 20 agents the next day, over lunch, that we had them bring their boats and we brought our boats and compared what were they using, how are they using it versus what we were using and how we were using it.
In your debrief?
They really did want to learn. And so that way they didn't have this happen again, that it, have a case where this goes on for 2 weeks. Even coming into this one, the sergeant said, if you find her, it's really going to affect my ego. And I get it. I don't want to crush anybody's ego. And
first of all, are we taking bets on which sergeant it was who said that it was going to crush their ego? I think we've seen some pretty precious little egos there amongst certain individuals who were part of Kiely's case. Now, in terms of them giving training to the teams that were looking for Kiely, that's pretty standard, something that they do along the way. And it also adds plausible deniability that down the track, if they are trying to cover things up, they can say, well, we just lacked the ability to read our side scan sonar and see that massive big blob underwater and figure out that it was a car. So we had to be trained by Adventures with Purpose so that next time we will see that ginormous blob underwater and check it out and discover that it is a vehicle. Thanks for listening. I hope this has got you thinking about a few different things. Please, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to my channel. Also, hit the like button and leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on this particular Jared discussion?